Hey, hi, how are you guys? It is that time. It's time for me to talk about my notable reads from March. Hi, welcome back to the channel. It's Alyssa. I am probably a little late getting this out, but better late than never. I still have this awesome new shirt that came in my Hello Lovely monthly subscription. So if you like romance, if you like fun teas and other wearables, get it. It's like 20 bucks a month. You get some ebooks for romance, and you get a chapstick, and you get like a laptop sticker, and you get like something wearable, some sort of like apparel item. This is not sponsored. I don't even have a rep code anymore. I just absolutely adore Hello Lovely. If I had the capacity to rep for them anymore, I would attempt to rep for them, but at this juncture, I don't have the capacity to rep for anybody else. So we are in the fantasy corner of my library, and we are going to go through my March notable reads. So every month, instead of giving you a full wrap up of everything I've read, because that takes forever, I give you 6 books that I absolutely adored in the last month and that I think are worth your time, in my humble opinion. Occasionally I will give you some honorable mentions, which you're going to get this month, and we just kind of go over some very quick and dirty stats. So I read a total of 16 books in March, and I am currently, as of filming on April 7th, I have read 50 books for the year. It's pretty good. I have like a 200 book goal, but my reading goals are like really loosey-goosey. My hard and fast goal is that I read at least 30 minutes every day. Otherwise, whatever happens, happens. So enough of that. Let's get into the books. I have 4 of them on hand, and I have 2 that I listen to as audiobooks. So the first one I'm going to talk about is All My Rage by Sabaa Tahir. This is her new YA sort of contemporary novel. This book was flipping fantastic. There are a lot of trigger warnings, I will say that, so please look it up before you read it if you are somebody who is sensitive to different things, especially around like assault sort of stuff. Definitely look this up. But this book was fantastic. So you have 2 kids from Pakistan. They are first generation. Their parents have, or their guardians have, come to the United States, and they are living in California. And you have this flashback between the boy, his name is Saul, and his mother. You get flashbacks to his mother when she was in Pakistan in the past, and you get in that that point of view sort of goes up through the present, and you get the current point of view with Saul and Noor. Saul and Noor. Noor is another young teen who's from Pakistan, and she has her own set of traumas, and Saul has his own set of traumas, and they become friends, and they become more than friends, and they find solace in each other, in a shared bond based on their own traumas, and they learn to deal with their traumas. And there is a sort of happily ever after, but it's not this like cookie cutter happily ever after that occurs. It's a lot more nuanced than that. It is very hard hitting on certain topics. Again, lots of trigger warnings, so please look those up. But it was just phenomenal. Like, this is my first ever Sabaa Tahir, and I hadn't read Ember in the Ashes at the time. I started Ember in the Ashes last month too, so it made me want to read her, but the writing is phenomenal. This book talks a lot about like music too. It uses music a lot in the story, because Noor finds a lot of comfort in listening to music. So there's a lot of discussion of different bands and songs, and there's such great music in here. So some people have put some Spotify lists together for it. It needs a Spotify list. Like, it's so good. I don't even know how to articulate this clearly to you, how good this is. It's just, please read this. Even if you don't like YA, I think you should read this, because I think it deals with a lot of what are actually very adult topics. From a kid's perspective. By kid, I mean like a young adolescent. They're like seniors in high school. There's a lot in here, from being an immigrant to SA to just dealing with depression, stress, PTSD, all kinds of stuff. So this is, and the writing is phenomenal. It's so good. It's so freaking good. Get this book. Read this book. Please read this book. moving on. Next up is a book that I don't think is going to be for everybody, but I think if you like literary fiction and you like fantasy, you should give Goliath The Tribe by Tochi Onnobuchi. This book has a weird non-linear timeline. It bounces through POVs, and it's way more literary than it is strictly fiction. I'm sorry, sci-fi or fantasy, but it is definitely sci-fi fantasy. So basically it is talking about gentrification and racism and classism, but from the plot structure of a fantasy novel, sci-fi novel, where everybody has left Earth because we've screwed up the Earth, and the only people left behind are anybody who is like poor and essentially a minority, and everybody else who could afford to leave has left. And at the same time, people are now starting to sort of come back to Earth, because where they are isn't great. Earth is kind of like, you can kind of settle on Earth again. There are these bubbles and domes, and you need certain resources. And you see how the people who were left behind made lives for themselves. But now that people are coming back into the sort of ghettoized Earth, you see how classism and racism plays a role in this, and how resources get taken from, like indigenous peoples that are living in lands that they've been working and making work for them for however long, and they're just being taken from them like water resources and shunted to these areas that are now being repopulated by the people who left Earth, the essentially white people who left Earth. So it's a really interesting look at what we're going through now, but through the lens of sci-fi. And I absolutely adore this book. It is a special book. It is not for everybody, but I will say my recommendation is, if you like literary fiction and you like sci-fi fantasy, try this book. I can't promise that you'll like it, because I definitely think it's a very niche book, but it's so good. I actually kind of like filming in this little corner. We might make this my filming corner for a bit. Next up, I'll talk about one of the 2 audiobooks I read. I read Jesus and John Wayne. Weirdly, this is like the 4th image that comes up when you do an image search for like Jesus and John Wayne. And thank you, Boston Globe, for giving me this image to have burned into my retinas. Thank you. Which is by Kristen Kobe Demez, or Kobe Demez. I don't know how to say her last name, so I apologize. And this is a nonfiction book that looks at how evangelicals, I'm a little cold, so let me put this on. This is like a book that looks at the intersection between evangelicals and American politics, essentially. How evangelicalism has developed, mostly from about like post-World War II to today, and how it's gained power in the political arena in particular, and also looking at some of the leaders of these evangelical movements and the power that they have, and the celebrities that tie into the ethos of evangelicalism, like John Wayne, and how their doctrine gets manipulated, etc., etc., etc. So it is a fascinating and infuriating book. I read it because it got recommended to me by Mara when we were doing the cultish live discussion. It was myself, Jess Owens, and Monet from Life with Monet, and Mara from Books Like Whoa. And Mara recommended this book, and so we read it. I read it. I think Jess is reading it now. I don't know if Monet has read it too, but she may have. It is infuriating. But if you like nonfiction, if you are either like an ex-evangelical, ex-Christian, confused Christian, atheist, whatever you are, it's a very interesting read. I think if you are a very devout Christian, you are going to be not really like this book. Read it. I did enjoy. I learned a lot. I got very angry, and it was good. And in nonfiction, I'm also, no surprise, is Into Every Generation a Slayer is Born, how Buffy staked our hearts. She didn't stoke it like a fire. She staked it like a Vampire Slayer by Evan Ross Katz. Obviously, I've tabbed the bejesus out of this. I read this with Ingrid Inspired. She is wonderful. Go subscribe to her channel. She's a fellow nurse. She works in the OR, and I love her. She's sweet and wonderful, and she's a good egg. But we read this together, and I am slowly making my way through Buffy, a rewatch. But this book was just really enlightening. One, to remind me of my joy of Buffy, and also to tell me a little bit more about the Joss Whedon drama around him. And I kind of wish it gave me a little bit more. Ingrid and I were discussing it. We were like, we feel like that the author keeps hinting that he's gonna like drop this big bomb about the Joss Whedon stuff, and it ends up being a slightly underwhelming. The amount of stuff he talks about, when you, not the content, but like the amount that he talks about it. The content's kind of, but the amount that he drops of like info, based on how much he like hints at it throughout the book leading up to the moment that he finally talks about it, it's a little underwhelming because you're expecting some big reveal, and it's kind of not. But there's a lot of, Joss Whedon does not sound like the greatest guy, but there's a lot of good discussions about art, separating the art from the artist in here. There's a lot of good discussions about how Buffy captured our hearts, and how this weird little show that everybody thought was kind of stupid on this little channel that was like a fledgling channel really shot up in popularity, because it gave all of us that were sort of weirdos and outcasts validity and representation. And it did some stuff in, you know, the late 90s on television that wasn't being done before, like having lesbian characters, or at least wasn't being done with any sort of, it wasn't common at all. So yeah, really great book. If this is like, it's again niche, if you really loved Buffy, I encourage you to read this. I think it's a very lovely dive into a show that I think touched many of our hearts, and is part of many of our young adult lives, if not our adult lives. So yes, please read that. The other book that I listened to is a very short book called Little Scratch by Rebecca Watson. And this little book is a stream of consciousness where this woman is taking you through basically her entire day and all of the thoughts that she's having in her day. And from the mundane to the more, I guess, esoteric and philosophical thoughts that one might have throughout their day. And because it's stream of consciousness, it is a very almost accurate portrayal of like anxiety and depression and internal monologue and all the things that go into having a trauma that you're not ready to talk about, because, you know, it starts and she's just kind of going through her day, and you see how this thing that happened to her outside of this day, prior to this day, leaches into every moment of her life. So even when she's doing the most mundane of things and getting ready for work and going to work and grabbing a coffee and doing this and and eventually she can't escape this trauma. And I think that's such a, it's done so beautifully and so realistically. Like when you have a thing that has hurt you, you can go through all the normal stuff you have to do in the day. And even when you think it's just, okay, everything's fine, I'm not going to think about it, it's not here, it's not here, it's not here, it's not here, bam, it comes in. There's triggers, there's things. And now you're worrying about it, and you're worrying about, like, she's got to worry about telling her boyfriend about this thing, and that's why this, that, and the other thing happens with her. And does she tell him, and will he accept it, and what's he going to think, and all this other stuff. And it was just such a relatable thing and such a personal book. And I feel like if you're somebody who can read a book like this, if you're in a place where your anxiety, your PTSD, your trauma is healed enough to read somebody and see that there is something normal about having your thoughts run like this, I think it's a beautiful book. I think if you're somebody who doesn't have to deal with these sorts of things, it's a beautiful way to understand why maybe your partner, your friend, your whoever, family member is the way they are. If you can get a little snapshot of what inside their brain looks like. It was a beautiful book. I do need to own a copy of it because I just think it is phenomenal and very well done, very well executed use of stream of consciousness. So love it. And then finally, we're going to talk about Dolly Alderton, Ghosts. This book and some of the other books on here were in reading vlogs, so if you've watched my reading vlogs, my weekly vlogs, you already know how much I love these books. because I did gush about them while I was reading it, so there's probably no surprise on what's on this month's notable reads list. But this book was so fantastic. So this is like a contemporary fiction, women's lit. I never know where to place these things. But you have our main character, Nina, who is a food writer, and she's in her 30s, and she's dealing with that like moment in your life where you're an adult, you have everything, but you don't have all the things checked off your list that you feel like society needs you to have checked off your list, like functioning relationship and a good career and a home and children and all the checklist, the woman checklist, right? All of your friends are getting married, they're having babies, they're doing this, that, and the other thing. And if that's not the path for you, where do you fit in? And she has just kind of come out of, in the last few years, a very long-term relationship. They ended very well. They're still friends. That person has moved on. They're all good friends. It's a very healthy, lovely, loving breakup. But now she's like, well, let me try a date. So she tries dating. And it was really interesting dating as a person in your 30s who doesn't necessarily like need to date and isn't necessarily sure if they want all those other things. Like, is motherhood and wifedom like part of, is wifedom even a word? Being a wife part of her life? I don't know. Like, she's not sure. She's still grappling with all these things. She loves her career. She loves writing. She loves all of that. And then on top of all of that, her father has been diagnosed with dementia. So she's sort of split between her life and her family and dealing with her dad and all of the stuff that comes with that. And then also dealing with her mother, dealing with her dad. And it's just this beautiful exploration of what it's like to be a 30-something-year-old woman who isn't married and is trying to figure their life out. And I just thought it was funny. It's very well written. It is just phenomenal. I read you in the vlog some moments within the book. I think that the way she talks about dating is just hilarious and so on the nose, and like, it's just so good. It is such a good book, and I want to know how much of this is, I need to read her memoir. She wrote a memoir, and this is her first fiction novel. But I want to know, I read the memoir and see how much of it is like autobiographical and how much of it is stuff that she's just compiled through observation. But like, it is a heck of a book, and it doesn't have like a traditionally happy ending. So it's not like a romance, but there is romance in it. But so I don't hesitate to call it a contemporary romance, but there is a happy ending. It's just not a happily ever after. But I think it is a happily ever after. You have to read it and find out. It's great. It's fantastic. Please read this book. I'll stick her right here. She's right here. So like, those, I believe, are all 6. Yeah, those are all 6 books that I read that I'm considering my notable reads from March. And then I have 3 for you honorable mentions, because I didn't know where to put them. And it was really hard to choose, because I realized going back through my reads for March that I had a really awesome reading month in March. Like, I loved so many books that I read that I want to, of course, honorable mention Black Prism by Brent Weeks. This book was phenomenal. Loved it. Sent me down a rabbit hole of just went right back to fantasy corner, like super happy. I'm reading book 2 now. Love it. Everything's great. Read it. My only warning is that for some reason there's a lot of like fat kid jokes, and I don't really know if it's strictly necessary to the plot that Kip get made fun of at all times for being the pudgy kid. So if that bothers you, skip it, but otherwise just in one ear, out the other, keep going, because the rest of the story is fantastic. Second is An Elderly Lady Must Not Be Crossed. These books are so good. Whenever one of these short story collections comes out, you have to read them. It's a murderous Miss Marple. It's fantastic. I talked about them in my last reading blog. You just need to get them. I'm sorry, get them. They're translated from Swedish. This little lady is the best. She kills all the people you need her to kill. And she's so like cunning, and oh, she's so good. She's so smart. She's so unassuming. It's perfect. Sometimes it's funny. Just read them. They're so good. If you just need like a beach read, a happiness read, a whatever, you just need a cozy freaking read, get these books. Get the audiobooks. They're 5 hours long. Phenomenal. And then finally, I have Sundial by Katrina Ward. And this thriller is so bizarre and wonderful. And I also talked about this in a vlog, and you need to read it. It's out from Tor. Maybe it's Tor.com. One of the Tor imprints put it out this year, and it is so good. It has that like crazy cover, which I'll have up here, and I freaking loved this book. It's one of those books that kind of ends sort of unsettlingly, where you're like, wait, so like, what did they decide? And you don't know throughout the whole thing like who to believe, because it just, everybody's so untrustworthy, including your narrator, that you're just kind of always a little like hesitant of what's happening and what's true. And it just, I love it. It was a really good thriller, and that's what I want. These are the kinds of books that I want. Screw you, Riley Sager. This is what I want. I want to be unsettled throughout the entire story. And it's so good. Anyway. So those are my notable reads for March. Let me know what some of your favorite books were from last month that you read, and just say hello. There've been a few new subscribers, so say hello. I love meeting new people. If you feel so inclined, please like and subscribe. And otherwise, I'll see you guys in my next video, whatever it may be, because it's my channel and I can do whatever I want. Bye.
So just sit with me, talking to the night until the morning, building chemistry. I don't think I ever wanna go come closer next to me. Trying to find another way to say this, but I think we were meant to